My parents kicked me out at 18, said I wasn't their problem, but when I rebuilt my own life, they squatted in my house, claimed it as theirs, and I had to fight in court to get them out. When my parents got married, they declared they would not have children. According to my relatives, I became pregnant largely by accident. I had a nice existence at first, but I believe that after I stopped being so adorable and lovely, my parents didn't want to spend as much time with me. In addition to their employment, they co-founded a firm. I was always subordinate to that business, which they lived and breathed. I didn't know much about my grandparents and the rest of my family until I was an adult because they resided in separate places. Therefore, when I was a child, I had no other family. TV and my instructors essentially raised me. My parents would simply give me money and tell me to buy anything I wanted, so I rarely spent my birthdays with them before I was 13. For Christmas and occasionally even for back-to-school purchases, it was essentially the same. I persuaded my parents to purchase a fake Christmas tree that I could assemble and disassemble each year once I turned 10. We wouldn't have had a tree at all without it. If I were to characterize my parents, they would be like those people that frown at other people, drink a lot of wine, and always wear black. Even though my dad now wears a toupee all the time, my parents still looked and acted the same when I last saw them. When I turned 16, I asked my parents if I might work part-time at their company. They informed me that they had no vacancies or anything similar. The fact that they didn't want me there could have been made clear to me. My parents informed me that I was an adult and should move out as soon as possible when I turned 18. While I was still in high school, I worked part-time. In addition, I had not saved nearly enough for college. Shortly after high school ended, they urged me to move out and pack things. They received a formal notice to leave, which gave me 30 days to do so. I wasn't even assisted in moving. I needed a friend's truck-owning dad to help me. I ended up working in stores and renting a crappy flat. At the time, I had no real-world skills and no time for college. My manager didn't like me and gave me poor ratings for the little stuff, so I was fired after just a few months. I can't even recall what they were anymore. But it wasn't simply the boss who mistreated me. I called the company to discuss it with a few others. After corporate investigated, the boss was shortly sacked for a variety of reasons. Someone informed me that cigarette theft was a component of it, but I don't know many of them because it was largely kept under wraps. The boss smoked a lot too. In order to keep my resume looking nice, corporate would alter the record to state that I was laid off rather than fired, even though they wouldn't hire me again. They must have believed I was broken or something. Due to my poor money management skills and inability to locate stable employment, I somehow lost all of my money very quickly. I was demoted. My parents refused to take me in, not even for a little period of time, when I went back to them for assistance. I had to spend the winter sleeping in a tent in someone's backyard after losing my job. Some of my pals were in various states, but all of them had attended college. In contrast, I was broke and working every job I could find to support myself. After learning that I was living in a tent, someone who lives next door to my parents offered to take me in for a little while so I wouldn't freeze. She assisted me in pestering my parents until they gave me the contact information for my estranged relatives. They offered me the details and a list of methods to contact them, but they didn't want to tell me, possibly because they were worried about being criticized for throwing out their son. They then advised me to never again annoy them. My dad's side of the family had not seen me since I was a baby, so when they heard from me, they were both surprised and happy. Their only grandchild is me. My grandparents immediately flew me over to live with them after learning what was happening. I was essentially adopted by them. My parents didn't even come to the airport to pick me up, despite being invited. It was over 10 years before I spoke to them again. According to my grandparents, they formally rejected my parents by removing them from their wills because they detested them for how badly they treated me. Although some who know my parents say they didn't like hearing it, they also claim that it didn't matter because my grandparents weren't in need of anything because they were wealthy. What they said turned out to be completely incorrect. I had saved up enough cash by the time I was a year old to begin attending a community college. My granddad helped me obtain an associate's degree and an excellent job. In order to retire to Arizona, my grandparents eventually offered to sell me their home. My grandma wanted to relocate to a warmer area because the cold weather was negatively affecting her health every year. Although I was happy to purchase the house, I was sad to see them go. For a third of its value, they gave it to me. In a few more years, it will be paid off. Because of my work, I occasionally have to travel. I might not be able to return home for weeks at a time because of it. But I'm not bothered by this. I don't have a lover, pets, or anything similar. Right now, I don't have time for them. But when I'm more organized in a few years, I'll find time. I don't want to spend my entire life alone. Then, in late 2020, After being gone for over 2 weeks, I returned home to see a large, unknown white vehicle in my yard. I was terrified when I noticed my parents' company emblem on the side of the van just as I was ready to call the police. Indeed, they were present. They managed to get inside and were now residing in my home. When I stepped in, they were so impolite as to greet me as if we were old friends. I told them to go, but they wouldn't because it was Grandma and Grandpa's house. I informed them that their home was no longer there. They sold it to me when they grew elderly. They would have been aware of that if they had any knowledge of my life. However, they put me out with the dogs 10 years ago, and I had no life experience. They refused to go and we got into a fight. My dad's parents were the first people I heard about. If they were interested, he and my mom could move in. I immediately rushed to my bedroom, locked the door, and dialed 911. When the cops arrived, they were of no assistance. When my parents claimed to have lived there long enough to be considered residents, they were actually lying to them. But since they hadn't been there for a month, there were no cameras to prove it. Neither did my neighbors have any cameras. It was my word against theirs on how long they had actually been there because they claimed to have squatters' rights. People claimed to the police that I was attempting to evict them without cause since we had a verbal lease. When my mother stated that, she even started crying. According to the police, it was a family dispute, and I should request that the courts expel them. In 2020, this occurred. Getting to court for anything took longer because of the outbreak. At the same time, my parents were making fun of me and residing in my house without paying the rent. They told me that their business failed and that they had to sell nearly everything they possessed to pay their creditors. All they had left was the van and a few personal belongings. To put it another way, they believed they could temporarily live in my home for free. They had work to do, too. Both of them found new jobs very soon. My mom works in sales, and my dad is a delivery driver. Since they were profitable and just fixed the power and water, they only handed me a $100 bill each month and urged me to be grateful that they were giving me any money at all. They would only discuss rent when I had taken 18 years of their lives. They said I owed them rent-free housing, yet at the time, they weren't requesting payment. Afterward, they said that they would no longer assist with the bills. I contacted my grandparents to let them know what was happening because I was so freaked out. They told my parents about it since they were so upset. However, they refused to move and stated they could remain in my home anyhow. My parents wouldn't have moved in if they hadn't sold me the house, Grandpa said, and he was sorry this had to happen. I advised him not to worry. The court would shortly grant my request to expel them, which I had already made. My parents were aware that their time was running out. That's what I made sure my folks could hear. They responded by remaining silent. Dad drove a delivery truck 6 days a week, a job he didn't particularly enjoy, so he was away much of the time. And after informing me that my parents were my parents and should be treated better, my mom attempted to take over my house when she had free time. She tried to get me to give her and my dad the master bedroom and even forced me to rearrange items in my living room. They attempted to convince me that I owed them something, but I urged them to stop since they didn't deserve better. I had no desire to be born. In addition, parents have an obligation to raise their own children. They were merely attempting to establish authority so that I wouldn't expel them. I last brought my parents to court in early 2021, 4 months ago. Since they were squatters, I took action. They simply contested the removal and attempted to deceive me into breaking the agreement, which is why we had to go to court. By claiming that it was once my grandparents' home and offering me $100 a month, they attempted to entice me to live in. However, there was no actual leasing agreement. They didn't try to construct a fake one because they realized it would be dishonest. Since they had no right to stay in my home, the judge ordered them to go within 30 days at the latest. They expressed their displeasure with me for kicking out my own flesh and blood when they saw me after court. I couldn't help but laugh and call them liars because they were behaving as like they didn't care about my welfare. I don't love them since they didn't love me. I owed them nothing at all. Since they had never truly been like that, they didn't deserve to be referred to as my parents, even though they attempted to remove everything that was mine. Telling them they were lying narcissists, I sneered at them and ordered them to mind their own business. This is because they are aware that if they don't leave my residence within 30 days, I will call the police. My father had a furious expression. My mother grabbed his shoulder and shook her head to stop him before he could say or do anything. After glancing down at me, he walked away. Yes, they did go, but not without a great deal of difficulty. They either ignored me completely or made me feel horrible in an attempt to influence my mind during the last month. I used a red marker to mark the days they had to depart on the calendar in the living room. The precise day they were to be out was indicated by a large red circle. The last day was March 2nd, as I still recall. My parents didn't leave my house permanently until the day they had to. And these people were so certain they could convince me to let them stay that they didn't even look for an apartment until after the court eviction, even though they had to move all of their belongings out of the house and spend a few days sleeping on the floor in the guest room. In addition, my mom had to work hard for weeks to find a place. The only thing they could find so fast was a little subpar studio apartment in the next city over, which is exactly what I had to do when I was 18. Very odd. The place was terrible the one time I took my mother to see it. The lone window overlooked a brick wall, and the rugs and walls were baby barf green. The toilet appeared to require replacement, the stove was the smallest I'd ever seen, and there was no dishwasher. Because of the walls, the interior was also not particularly quiet. Two people were already arguing noisily in the apartment next door when we were there. I pretended that I was unaware of anything till my mother stopped giving me depressing looks and hints that I should feel awful for making them live in such a location. They immediately signed the lease and moved their few possessions in over the weekend. After 5 months of sleeping in my guest room, they finally requested the queen-size bed, dresser, and flat-screen TV. I didn't want them in the house any longer, so I instructed them to go. They gave me the impression that I was treating them as though they were ill and in need of nothing else. I replaced the locks on all the outside doors as soon as they were forced to depart permanently. All of their belongings were in the apartment, and they had spent their final night in my guest room. They watched me begin to remove the old lock from the front door as they climbed into the vehicle. Neither they nor I mentioned anything. But after I put on the new doorknob, they continued to observe me. Then, at last, they departed. I breathed a deep sigh of relief as that van drove away. I believed that they no longer needed to care about me because their moment had finally arrived. Not at all, but they could live under a rock. They just called my parents. They called them to boast that they had started a new company in the same state as me that was identical to their previous one and that they were essentially on track to return to their pre-plague lifestyle, which involved making a lot of money and demeaning others. I've already searched Google for their new company. It appears to be doing well. They have many positive reviews and all that. I must admit that I'm feeling rather irate at the moment. They spent months squatting at my house for virtually nothing after I made them homeless. After that, they reverted to their previous selves as wine-loving, snooty executives. If justice is being served, it's taking much too long. Edit. I would like to express my gratitude to everyone for their insightful comments. I'm starting to realize that a lot of the arguments being made in favor of selling the house are sound. They said that it would be beneficial if I got closer to them. They advised me to proceed with selling the house if I so desired. I'm giving it a lot of thought right now since if I move out, my friends and family won't know where I am. To see if they can send me down south, I'll ask my supervisor. In any case, I doubt I would mind the heat. Ever since I had to spend the night in a tent, I detest winter. I don't have many pals where I am right now because I'm very alone. Making a fresh start somewhere else wouldn't be difficult. This house is important to me. However, since I didn't grow up there, I'm considering moving. We definitely need more cameras, and I'll check into that. It's really stupidly easy, if you're curious about how my folks broke in and got away with it. They entered through a window that I neglected to secure. To enter, they removed the screen and opened the door. I kept my extra house keys on a hook close to the kitchen, and they stole duplicates of them. My parents gave them working house keys and pretended to be enthusiastic about my allowing them move in when they informed the cops they were squatters and that we had a verbal agreement. My parents had already updated their address with the DMV online before I had even arrived home. They informed me that their new IDs with my address on them will be mailed to me shortly after showing the officers a printout of the paperwork they had completed. With a furious expression, the cops informed me that it was a family concern and that I should file to have them removed, just like any other individual. I wish I had noted their badge numbers so I could report them. In addition, my parents did indeed have their mail sent to my home. They used to claim to have resided there as well. The problem is that if they had been in my residence for more than 30 days with my consent, they would have been considered renters. They claimed that I had instructed them to be there, and they employed every shady tactic in the book to persuade the police to believe them. They were unable to determine the length of time my parents had resided there. Many began to place blame on one another, and the police were unsure of whom to believe. I had to court them outside the house because of this. However, since my parents weren't utilizing the Wi-Fi when they lived with me, I wouldn't give them the password. However, because they created a mobile hotspot on their phones while they were hiding in my house, they were able to connect to the internet. There is absolutely no use in encouraging me to write negative reviews or discuss my parents' past. To be honest, I'm going to put them out of my mind. On the other side, if they lied to launch their new company, I'll buy them some popcorn when it reopens because they needed assistance. Here's what to do if you don't believe the 30-day rule about squatters. If someone is on your property for more than 30 days with your consent, they become your tenants and are entitled to certain rights. On the matter, this is a direct U.S. legislation. You will typically have to go through the eviction process when this occurs. You still have to abide by the rules. They lied about obtaining permission and how long they had been in my house, which is why they broke them and lived in an unoccupied house even though no permission was requested. It took us 5 months to get rid of them because of this. You are aware now. Update. Since it has been 5 days, I made the decision to learn more. I asked my relatives how my parents launched their new company for 2 days. In less than 2 years after filing for bankruptcy, they were able to launch a new company, which is not common. The answer is no, for those who believed it to be an MLM. Without a surety, not even my parents would do that. MLMs, they believe, are not for them. In addition, the new company my parents are launching is, in my opinion, just about half as large as the previous one. Previously, they employed a minimum of 2 individuals. Currently, they are the only ones remaining. I was advised to monitor my credit report in case my name was stolen. I didn't think much of them because I had to deal with my parents residing in my house without my consent at first. They were also aware of it. I doubt they even bothered to recall my legal information from 10 years ago, though, to be honest. It's possible they couldn't even recall how to spell my first name. But I did keep my score safe. It hasn't shown any odd behavior at all. At least they refrained from attempting to embezzle their company funds from me. The people that truly care about me are my good grandparents, who are my dad's side grandparents. Additionally, they are unaware of how my parents obtained the funds necessary to launch a new company. Since they informed my parents that they didn't want my dad's inheritance, they have contacted them frequently, but they won't respond because they called some time ago to boast about their recent success. It is evident that my dad's family did not assist my parents in any way after that. How about my mother's? My folks still gave me that old list of individuals to call. My biological grandmother's telephone number was also included in that list. When I was homeless, I did attempt to contact my maternal grandma once more. She was indifferent. Despite the fact that I have never met them, my mom's parents are very similar to mine. I suppose my mom is the one my dad truly found his true love for. They were destined to be together, as someone else has already stated. I had the opportunity to reconnect with my maternal grandmother. In addition to having been divorced from her spouse for a considerable amount of time, my maternal grandfather passed away. I was unaware of that. However, he passed away 7 months ago. He left my mother a sizable money as well. They obtained the funds necessary to resume operations there. My maternal grandmother also sounded extremely pleased of them. There wasn't much more she wanted to discuss. My parents probably called their grandparents to tell them how good things are going for them again because of this. Both my dad's side of the family's good grandparents, and I don't care that they didn't want to make things great after my grandparents cut them off. My folks are told to go kick rocks by everyone. They are not interested in interacting with them. It's not only me whose parents have given up. There are many divorced and inebriated singletons on my mom's side of the family that appear friendly around one another despite their animosity. I would describe the people on my dad's side as pleasant and typical. In contrast, my father destroyed a lot of connections. For some reason, my parents kept me away from my grandparents, who were thrilled to have me in their lives. Why they did what they did is unknown to me. I believe it's because they didn't want their parenting style to be criticized. I would have preferred living with my grandparents or attending a private school. However, NARs aren't particularly content if they have no one to put down. What they have said about me behind my back throughout the years is unknown to you. It appears that my parents did nothing wrong to launch a new company. You can't tell the IRS or anybody else much. There is no restriction on using inheritance funds to launch your own company. My mother was an only child, much like me. She inherited everything after her father passed away, including his home and property. My parents currently reside there. My maternal grandmother sent me a photo. The house isn't very nice, but it's not horrible. I'd say it's about the same as mine. My parents will probably not have to trouble me in the future because they now have a home to live without having to pay for it. I want to sell my house and move. However, it turns out that my employer doesn't have an office in Arizona. So, after I sell my house, I either quit and get a job in Arizona, or I don't. Another option would be to remain where I am and hope my folks don't disturb me. I'm thinking of finding a job since I don't want my parents to ever discover me again. I won't move if it's not feasible. However, I would prefer to be able to. What if I want to sell the house as soon as possible? Purchasing more cameras for it is pointless. But I might as well install cameras both inside and outside if I can't find another work in Arizona over the next 3 months and am forced to remain here. Many individuals have given me positive advice regarding which cameras to purchase and where to install them. Although I don't believe it will ever happen again, I do not want my parents to ever look for me again. If they require assistance in their latter years, I won't give a damn. They will receive nothing in return for their contributions. I will always consider them dead. The members of my dad's family also concur. If I ever become a parent or step-parent, I will make every effort to avoid becoming like my parents. It is unfair to children.